Hi, this is Joe from JRX and welcome to the JRX Bell 407 version 1.41 update. I'm recording this in VR and I will apologise in advance for my miswords and mispronunciations and anything that I forget, because this is unscripted. And before we begin, or take to the air, let's have a quick look at the changes. I'm just going to jump forward. So the change list will be posted in the comments and or the forums, but this is what is fixed and or updated. The crash, obviously, on the ground during flight or crash on load. Following on from that, the crash then hang. The flight models per frame tolerance, which we'll talk about later on, has been updated. The wind interaction with the aircraft has been reduced to the default levels. Cruise attitude has been reduced. We'll take a look at that in the air. I've added the external shadows on some of the exterior equipment. I've done some coding on the throttle, which will give you better mouse control. I've increased the rate of descent for this aircraft. It was a little bit floaty. We can look at that. The torque gauge coding, my favourite. We can take a look at it in the air, but you're going to need to fly this to have a look at the engine load under all situations, and then you can give me feedback on that. I've made some changes to the skid settings in PlaneMaker. They're a little bit more forgiving. Searchlight brightness has been increased to 200,000 CD. Vibration code, a little bit too strong to start with. I have updated this, and vibration does not render well in VR, so I'm most likely not able to give you a decent overview of vibrations in VR. They're on menu tablet page 2. They're off at the moment. We can go to the max, which is 3, and personally it looks much better in 2D. If you've got a super system that can run X-Plane very well on VR, then it might look slightly better, but for me, I tend not to use these in VR. Let's go back to the AVI tab where I've got my list. Default VR pilot seat position has been updated. If I go for my recenter, unless you're in VR, you're never going to really see how this is. If I sit up front and forward, so effectively it's here, but again, this video won't demonstrate what I can really see in VR. For the purpose of this video, I'm having to set myself back because when I record in VR, the field of view is quite narrow. Tablet font colors, contrast has been changed. I think we can see them on page 2. We've got rid of any of the blues and greys, and we should be white or green on grey now. Most likely a VR specific item. The AAPS, now this is the airspeed actuated pedal stop. So if you know or you don't know, in the Bell 407, above 55 knots, the anti-torque pedals are limited, and they are limited by 25%. Now, back in the day, there was a series of accidents with the tail rotor striking the boom, and Bell's fix for that was to limit the pedal travel above 55 knots. We can test this on the ground. If we press and hold the AAPS test button, if we push down, you'll see the travel stop there, and the same for the other side. Now, I have checked this with the data refs, both on the ground and in the air, and I'm seeing the maximum of 75%, or 0.75, which is the pedal travel. It goes from 0 to 1, or sorry, it goes from -1 to 1, with 0 being in the middle, but when the AAPS is on, it go to minus 0.75 to 0.75. There shouldn't be too many occasions when you're needing to put that much pedal input in above 55 knots anyway, but it's there. There was some issues with the cabin and the utility lamps. That's these two here, that one and that one. These were staying on with power. That is fixed. I've done some work on FMOD. Primarily the environmental sounds were quite loud when you had the headset or helmet on, which shouldn't be the case. The FMOD alarm sounds, so all the tones and warning sounds that you get for various things, I've normalized them so they're all the same volume, because the radio altimeter volume was extremely loud, but they're all normalized now and they're all slightly quiet. I just felt that they was a little too loud. There's also been some other minor internal changes in FMOD. That's FMOD triggering for the start and a few other things. I've updated the core xLua module to v1.41. If anyone on, well, anyone, not just Windows, Mac and Linux, if anyone has an issue, I'll show you how you can downgrade or change to any version of that. xLua code file exits and crash handling, so when this aircraft crashes or you exit or unloads and you change aircraft, there was a few issues which I fixed across all the files, and we've updated the versions on the front end and on the menus. So that's it. I think what I can do is we'll just have a quick flight. I'm not going to try and make a long video. We're just going to have a quick look at some of the changes to the flight model in the air. Let's get some wind on, because we can check that one out whilst we do it. If we go to Windows, if we go to flight config and then come to weather. Okay, we've got a 2 knot gusting 4 knot wind layer there. Let's increase that. So let's come up to knot 41. Let's go 27 and we can gust that up to, if we go about there. Okay, so that's the 35 knot limit for this aircraft anyway. And if you remember, the airframe was reacting quite aggressively to wind, but you're now going to see that's reduced. That's triggered a change in the light conditions. This was an excellent idea, but they've really done nothing with it. We've got reset to pilot view, show map, or reset floating windows. Could have been so much better. Let's put that up there. Okay, we've got some rain coming from our left to right, so I'm guessing, I didn't check the wind direction. We'll find out when we lift off into the hover anyway. Okay, so I'm going to reset the view. We'll keep the light as it is, to be honest, because I feel it's easier to see, particularly in VR. One thing that I can now demonstrate is that if any of you suffer from dark cockpits, I did add a command called toggle VR gamma. I've got a button assigned to that, and all it will do, it will lift the brightness just enough to make it not look overly dark. To be fair, the cockpit doesn't look too bad today with the conditions, but on a bright sunny day it's jet black in here, and I understand what X-Plane are trying to achieve, but I just think it's a little bit extreme. If I toggle the VR gamma now, that was not the VR gamma, that was the SAS. There we go. Sorry, I did press the wrong button. Unscripted, unrehearsed. Okay, so that's the VR gamma fix, for want of a better word, on, and it just lifts the lightness in the cockpit, but the way it works, everything brightens up. So if you look outside, brighter. I don't use it all the time, but occasionally when it goes jet black and it looks unreal, I just tend to flick it on. This can only work in VR, and if you own VR then you can try it out, see how you get on. But for now we'll leave it off. We're going to take off, we're going to have a look at a couple of things. We're going to look at the effect of the wind on the airframe. We're going to look at the rate of descent, because that's changed. That will be quite a big change, I feel. It was quite floaty before. Just come up to flight. I think when we lift off we're going to turn to the left and come into wind, if the rain is following the wind in X-plane. I like to think it is. Let's keep an eye where possible on the torque as well. Okay, so we're now at flight. CWP's clear, everything up there looks okay. Not a flying lesson, I'm not an instructor, I'm not an expert. Yep, that's the wind there. So if we look at the airspeed indicator, it's showing 25, 20 knots. Okay, let's have a nice gentle climb out. Try not to hit the terminal. Okay, so you note now that the buffeting has been reduced. I've almost turned it back to default. If you like that and you want to add that similar effect, then you just need to go to the weather settings and turn on turbulence, and that will do the trick for you. I will speak about the changes that have been made in PlaneMaker, in that if you change one setting in PlaneMaker, you'll almost certainly affect 5 other things. Now, I like to think that I can catch everything, but there may be 1 or 2 things that have changed that I'm not entirely sure about. Just bear that in mind. Remember, all of these 1.4 versions, until I say otherwise, are beta. Okay, we're crosswind now. No custom scenery for me, this is just all stock X-plane. It's not looking too bad. Okay, so that was a demonstration of the flying in high winds. Let's just come back round into wind. I'm going to pause the sim very briefly here. Let's take a look at Windows settings, general, flight models per frame. Let's go to 2. As you know before, 6 was recommended. I still recommend 6, and we'll speak about why in a moment. Let's go to flight models per frame 2, which historically was tipping over the last version. Graphic settings, system performance, aircraft performance, flight models per frame are all linked. And you can normally tell when you're setting to too high in X-plane, and specifically the flight models per frame, because the aircraft will slide or wobble on the ground, and that's an indication that everything is potentially too high, and all you need to do is lower one or both. I can normally tell in VR if my settings are too high. If I pause and then look at the rotors, if there's tearing on the objects, then X-plane's struggling. Okay, so that's just a transparent blade. They don't look great when they're paused, but in real life we don't pause helicopter blades. But if you can see tearing on that object, then you're pushing your system too much, or anything that's spinning fast. Okay, so we're on flight models per frame 2. We haven't crashed yet. We haven't crashed the sim yet. So I am liking to think that this is fixed. But I suspect when we land and touch down, because I'm recording and my VR settings are reasonably high, I might maybe see some ground movement. But I'll just lower the flight models per frame back to 6. Okay, we spoke about rate of descent. Maybe we should be a little bit higher. You need to be a little bit more careful with the collective now, because if you come all the way down, we're going to drop out the sky quite quickly. It's still a powered descent, it's not an auto rotation. It's that I felt, and one or two of the users felt, that it was a little bit too much. Golf course, let's see if we can make the descent and landing on one of them fairways. So I'm lowering the collective down now, and you can see we're coming down pretty quick. Let's bleed off some of the speed. Remember, not a flying lesson, almost certainly in a risky situation. I'm just demonstrating that we have a greater rate of descent from now, and you should be aware of that. That's a nice fairway. Still one or two things that I feel needs to be polished up, but I'm not going to speak about them. Okay, so I feel before, if we was in version 1.3, we would have had to gone out a long way to give ourselves some space or some S-turns to come down to this first fairway. So just be aware with the flight model that that is not been fixed. I think I've just made it a little bit more realistic. Okay, so we've spoken about crashes, we've spoken about that. We are on flight models per frame 2. We're still in sim, which is good. We spoke about the skid gear being a little bit more forgiving. Skid gear is a little bit more robust. I felt before we was crashing too easily. Obviously I'm not promoting hard landings, but if you're a new sim pilot, you don't want the sim to crash, the aircraft to reload every time you make a landing. So they are more forgiving on that. So yeah, the torques is never ever going to be stable. It's always going to vary. It's always going to go up and down. But what you shouldn't see now is the jump from 70 to 30 to 95. So it should be a lot more stable for you, but again it needs to be looked at under all conditions and load, and then you can check back, no doubt, on the forums. Engine NR overspeed. Okay, so when we're descending in version 1.40, the NR, which is the outer needle of that gauge, that was permanently overspeeding, and it shouldn't be. If we're descending with power, we shouldn't be departing too much from the 100%, up or down, depending. So that's fixed. So you won't get the constant NR rotor alarm. We can demonstrate that later on. Cruise attitude reduced. Okay, as you can see there, we are not so much nose down, and it's looking a lot better and a lot more realistic. I think we can just come out the autopilot and we can have a look at this engine overrun, which not many or no one mentioned anyway, but I knew it was there. I'm going to bring the collective down quite aggressively, and if we can look at the NR now, okay, we're just about 105%. Okay, we are descending with power, it's not an auto rotation. This is what I mean about this sudden drop. You just need to be careful. I think that's all we need to say for this video. This is v1.41. These are the changes. And try not to make support requests on the news forum. When I post the link for this, that it's been updated and sent to the store, I will create a new user area in the JRX 407 for specifically v1.41. Remember, everything's in beta, everything's fixable, but I like to think that 1.41 is pretty good now. Okay, that's it for this video. Remember, question support, either the YouTube channel or JRX forums. And until then, thank you and goodbye.